Well, good evening. This is Dr. Sweetie Conway, and I am here today on another edition of Medicine Makers, where if your destination is a career in medicine, we're going to show you how to get there. And today we are excited. Well, it's a little bit of a sad moment because today is our last episode for this season. But we got a chance to spend it with Mr. Daryl Neighbors, and he is the Dean of Admissions over at Loyola Medical School. We have a wonderful relationship with Loyola Medical School, and we're so excited that our young kids are continuing to build upon this partnership with this excellent, wonderful university that shares the same mission as Am Abel Foundation. And we'll talk to Mr. Neighbors, and I hope you guys continue to tune in with us live on Facebook. And again, for those of you who are with us live on Facebook, if you have any trouble with the Facebook Live audio, just go to cantv.org. /hotline. This is a call-in show. You can call in and ask us questions if we have enough time, and we'll let you know when. That's at 312-738-1060. But first, I wanted to make sure that you got a chance to find out a little bit about what is going on with Am Abel Foundation. So take a look here. It is our Medicine and Mimosas, or better known as our fourth annual Preparing Our Successors in Medicine annual pinning celebration. We are excited because this year we have over 50 brand new students that are actually coming into the program. These are kids who actually are our future. They want to be doctors, and we are super excited about that. That is on Saturday, April the 13th. So if you are interested in purchasing tickets or anything like that, you just go to the website for more information. So that is Medicine and Mimosa. What I'm more excited to share with you is that at this particular Preparing Our Successors in Medicine, we are going to be celebrating Dr. Terry Mason. Let me go back so you can take a look at that. Dr. Terry Mason is our hero in healthcare this year. He has a 40-year and 4-decade-long legacy in Chicago doing fantastic work, along with he's our hero in healthcare, and our still standing awardee is Orion Morrison, a first-year medical student at Rush University. And when you hear her story, sorry that it's kind of on a timer and it's kind of sliding away, but when you hear her story, you will be amazed. This young woman has battled homelessness and all sorts of challenges in order to arrive in medical school still standing. And finally, we have our Physician Mentor of the Year, Miss Joy, or Dr. Joy Elion. She does so much for the foundation, and we can't wait to celebrate her. She is extremely deserving. So we are very happy that you have decided to join us here on today, and we do have Mr. Daryl Neighbors from Loyola Medical School. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Dr.
Oh, it is my pleasure. And so we just want to, since he is the Dean of Admissions at Loyola, we want to talk to him a bit about the things that goes on every day over at Loyola Admissions. So the first thing I want to ask you is, everyone knows that getting into medical school is hard. There is no question about that. Can you talk to us about the scope of that? How difficult? Give me some stats. How hard is it? How worried should our kids be?
Well, I think like most things, it's competitive, and I believe that now that you have allopathic and osteopathic options, and you have offshore options, that the scope might be a little bit less competitive if you can consider all of those avenues, but obviously for us, we're an allopathic medical school. So when you consider the landscape of allopathic medicine, and each year when you consider the number of applicants, there are roughly about 50,000 applicants each year. From that, about 20,000 seats, all right? So that's a 2 out of 5 ratio, or 40% odds on acceptance and matriculation to medical school. If you put that into perspective with our particular program, we're pretty lucky. We had 15,015 applications in the last cycle, 14,905 in the current cycle. We yield about 10,800 completed applications from the primary application pool, and I can explain what that means a little bit later. And that yields about 670 interviews, which yields about 165 seats in the class. So the odds of getting an interview are 7%. And from there, you're talking about, about a 2% chance of getting a seat. So yes, it is competitive, but if you consider 180 allopathic medical schools, if you consider the other, 80 or some odd options for osteopathic school, and again, if you're thinking broadly about an application and only doing it once, I would encourage trying to consider all avenues in that iteration of your application, and in order to increase your odds of success.
Absolutely. So it sounds like what you're saying is that yes, overall the process is extremely competitive, but there are other options that students can look at and can consider.
Right. Allied health is now becoming more a part of a landscape of options and career paths. We have physician assistants, nursing, public health. I hear from students all the time about their desire to want to go to medical school, and again, there are certain things that I can look at and say, well, competitiveness for you might be higher than most, again, given certain indicators based on their application. So what I'm trying to encourage is think about the broad nature of service in healthcare. There are lots of options, there are lots of career paths that have not even been created yet. So if it's what you want to do, explore every avenue. Obviously, there's less expense in going down the PA path, probably a little bit less expense going down the nursing school path. Investing in, medicine is a 4-year commitment, plus another 2 years, an internship, another 3-4 years residency, and then a fellowship possibly, considering, your specialty options. So that's a long pathway with very little financial benefit, right? What I see now with millennials is the immediate gratification of having an income, and that's not what's going to happen in medicine.
Yes.
So that's the thing to also consider.
So for those of us who were married to medicine, like the show, and don't want to we won't abandon medicine because we know that's what they really want. And we have those kids that may not get in the first time, but they know that they really, really want to do it. They've looked at it, they've researched it, and that's what they really want to do. Can we talk about what are the benchmarks that they have to reach? In general, we know that each school is different. Each school is looking for something different, and we could talk about that. But can you hit the 4 top benchmarks? What do kids or students, because we have all age students who actually want to become doctors many times, what are the key benchmarks that medical schools are seriously going to consider?
Well, I could state the obvious: academics. When you think about academics, you have to think about it in specific terms of academic performance over the course of your academic career. So again, we're talking about undergraduate education, anything requiring a master's degree or any programming related to a post-baccalaureate program. Seeing a grade trend increase towards medical school is essential. When you take your GPA, your grade point average, and you parse it down into the science core, the courses you've taken specifically in science, that should be equal or better than your overall GPA. So that's a good sort of benchmark to consider if you're going down a path now and thinking, well, am I going to apply? Obviously, taking the MCAT, you should only take it once, so it's hard to say it's a benchmark until you take it. But testing overall, consider, the process of getting into undergrad. How did you do on the SATs?
Sure.
How did you do on the ACTs? Just think about tests in general. Are you anxious about tests? When you take exams in your courses, do you do well typically? Do you need help, support? That's another benchmark. Your overall confidence with taking exams, because that's largely what happens in medical school. The first 2 years are benchmarks against scores and evaluations that are exam-based. And again, that leads you towards the certification exams, which are the step exams. Again, all those things are important benchmarks in evaluating whether or not you're ready to move on in the process. And then, you know, I mean, most medical schools have gone to a holistic review model, which is we take all of these different benchmarks and we kind of say, okay, we kind of get a sense for this, the academic proficiency of a student. But there are so many other things that go into medicine. You have to be able to work with people. You have to be able to communicate. You have to be able to be a leader. You're going to be the leader in the wards. You're going to be the person that everyone's going to go to when things go wrong and things need to be adjudicated or understood. So you have to have experience working with people. You have to have experience being a leader, being someone that can handle, you know, adverse situations. I often ask the question about, you know, are you the person that if there's a you know, situation going on, if the drama circle is hitting your area, are you the person that comes into play and becomes the arbitrator of peace, settles the dispute, or are you the person that adds, you know, gasoline to the drama circle fire?
I don't think anyone's going to acknowledge that, but
Well, it's something to think about.
yeah.
You have to understand the kind of person you are in adverse situations. That's the best way to know that you're ready for a path towards medicine.
Now, you did speak about holistic admissions, and of course, but we all know that many students probably may not even get a chance to get screened. So I think what our kids are, or what our viewers may want to know, is what are some of the standard benchmarks that they should be shooting for, at least, to make sure that they're at least considered in terms of GPA. For example, you're not really looking at a kid with a 2.5 GPA. So, I mean, to give, just for some concrete ideas, what are some of the grades? What are some average scores that will at least get the admissions committees to pay some attention to you, so they can get a chance to do the holistic admissions?
Well, when I present for the Am Abel Foundation and the conferences and the different sessions that I have, I do show them this information. It's based on AMCAS data and it's based on our data. So again, when you're looking at GPA, for example, grade point average, for most applicants in the country, the average GPA is a 3.57.
Get your grades up.
All right? But I would say to you, a lot of students with those GPAs now are saying, I'm not competitive enough.
Right.
So that's the overall GPA. The science GPA, and remember what I said before about the science GPA being, you know, trending higher, is at 3.7 overall. It's for the same pool. Right?
Yes.
So they've obviously invested a lot more time in studying and preparing in a basic science format. And again, what pulls that down could be English, right? Poor writing skills, poor communication skills, you know, so sometimes it's important to understand why those are not correlated exactly the same, or why there might be a discrepancy. I would say obviously the MCAT is kind of the most considerable benchmark because there's the most data out there to support this different path, right?
Yes.
The different path based on race, based on socioeconomic resources and preparation and where you went to high school and where you grew up. There isn't enough evidence to support any dramatic conclusion, but what I could state from the evidence and the data is that by and large, the average for the new MCAT is around a 503, and that continues to creep up each year that the test has been offered. I think we're now in the fourth or fifth administration of the new exam.
Yes.
So when you kind of consider the average for all candidates at a 503, you can actually parse that out and you can say, okay, so for candidates who are, you know, coming from socioeconomic disadvantage, or candidates who are coming from an African American cultural background or Hispanic cultural background, there are distinctions that separate them in the pool. So we can look at an African American male and say a 495 is the average for that pool, right? Well, how can we say that? Well, we have evidence, we have data. AMCAS is supported through a lot of data resources that all of us share, all of us contribute to. When we get these applications, it's all kind of cleared through AMCAS. So they're the ones that also administer the exam. So they have all the data necessary for us to understand the distinctions among, you know, race, ethnicity, gender. For Hispanic students, the average is about a 493. For Asian students, it's about a 502. For Caucasian students, it's about a 503, which is about the national average. But again, consider the dimensions of the pool. The pool itself is 50% Caucasian, 20% Asian, 7% African American, 7% Hispanic, less than a percent Native American, less than a percent Alaskan Native or Native Hawaiian. Interestingly enough, 1% international, 3% don't disclose anything.
Yeah.
So, that's how they pivot a lot of this data. They pivoted on the understanding of resources, and again, how do they determine that? A lot of the questions in the AMCAS application are trying to understand the candidate's path. And sometimes, like I said, if you disregard a question, if you don't disclose race, if you don't disclose ethnicity, now it's not reported, now it can't correlate to anything.
Yeah.
So it doesn't help in the grand scheme of things understand how each candidate can be considered based on these varying dimensions of class and race and socioeconomic background. But AMCAS every year invites students to complete more of these data points. What we do with them at the end of the day is largely up to us. But I think it's all important in terms of our ability to create a diverse class. So I'm really proud of our efforts to build a diverse student body. 30% underrepresented minorities in our class last year.
Yes.
Underrepresented minority is actually a term used in AMCAS lingo that specifically states these classifications of students. Again, the 7% Hispanic, the 7% African American, when you consider the context of health disparities in this country and who has the most need for primary care. You're talking about these very cultures and these very specific demarcations of race and ethnicity, and when you kind of consider the population dynamics of a city like Chicago, it's very easy to see how these populations are most impacted by a lack of health care. So as a medical school, we're incumbent, we're responsible to build a base of students that can go out to communities and serve. And again, you don't have to be an African American student of medicine to serve in an African American community, but what we're trying to do is assert that all of our students, whether they're Caucasian or Asian or African American, see disparity, see the underserved communities of our community, and work to serve them. So again, that's not a benchmark, it's not a metric, it's experience, it's application of deeds, right? So you can write about your interest in serving that community, or you can actively work in pursuit of service towards that community. And those are the things that don't show up in a metric, but they're very important benchmarks for us.
You talked a little bit about minority students and some of the numbers as you related to MCAT scores. We know that minorities make up, and there's different statistics, but roughly about blacks, particularly about 14% of the population, and I know you may have some different statistics, but they won't be too far off from that. And about 4% of our practicing physicians. First of all, how do we do a better job in preparing our students of color for these opportunities, and how do you identify these students who may be struggling currently with those scores, but they have all of the other criteria? And we know that even though, yes, those scores are sometimes or often are a surrogate for like USMLE 1, 2, and 3 scores, but it's also been shown that some of these kids with 495s and 496s will do really well on the USMLE, and that in combination with all of their experiences that they bring to the table make them a good applicant.
Right.
How do we identify the students whose scores may not quite match up? And also the second part of that question is, how do we prepare and make a better candidate, because we know that there is a need for our minority students in medicine.
Right. Absolutely. You've hit on a very important topic, and I think, in my experience, there's a great deal, and I spoke to a student today, wasn't an African American student actually, interestingly enough, But my discussion with him yielded kind of the same thing that I would see in most students. I think there's a lot of things that are very much the same, and that is confidence. The confidence to go in and know that if you're seated in a class that you deserve to be there.
Yes.
That there's no imposter syndrome.
Yes.
There's no feeling that I'm inadequate or I'm undeserving.
Yeah.
In our culture, educationally, when you consider the path towards this goal of getting into medical school, unless you've been supported throughout your educational journey in this way to build this confidence, it is going to be compromised in medical school because it's so competitive.
Yep.
It's an interesting thing. My dad would always tell me about his educational experience. He graduated valedictorian of his high school, and the thing that he tells me is, he went to an all African American school, and he said that the one thing that they taught him was confidence.
Yeah, that's true.
Being supported by your peers, by your teachers.
Yes.
He never, so this whole idea of being an imposter, being, not being in the right place, not being deserving, he never had any of that.
Right.
So he was able to take that confidence with him. So I would say that, building that at the secondary school level, building that within, whatever pipeline effort we can put together to ensure that it doesn't leak, that is strong enough to carry the student into this process, I think that is important. Obviously, when it comes to taking tests, when it comes to evaluations, these things have to be understood to be, a process.
Yeah.
And, I've talked to many physicians, both of color and who are not of color, and they have, all demonstrated that at some point they learned how to take a test.
Right.
There's actually, it's like, the Magna Carta, when they discovered the Magna Carta, they understood that language had all these permutations to it. Well, the same thing with understanding the codes and sort of the dynamics of any standardized test. Once you have mastered the code, then it carries with you, and it's not the kind of thing that you lose. So ultimately, we have to prepare all students to break the code.
Right, which is what Am Abel Foundation is trying to do with our pipeline efforts, because that's also one of the reasons why so many young people are drawn to the HBCUs, and it's for a good reason.
Support,
Yeah.
Confidence. They're getting the skills that they need.
Yes,
and it's translatable. The thing that I would hope and I encourage is that all schools look very broadly. All medical schools, that is, look broadly at the tapestry of all of the campuses across the country. One thing that this recent scandal has, the admission scandal has demonstrated to me is that there's not enough emphasis placed on the other, 2,000 undergraduate colleges and universities out there, and focusing on the 20 that might be the selective ones that everyone's trying to, fight over to get into. This is the byproduct. You have an artificial environment of competitiveness. You have an artificial environment of success based on evaluations of metrics that may not necessarily yield anything in the real world.
absolutely.
These applications of skills that we're trying to get to through a holistic process help us understand the person's motivation. So again, going back to this conversation I had with the student today, he did not receive an offer from us. He wanted to know why. Good academic record. But he understood at some point when I told him, there's nothing here that suggests that you can lead others. There's nothing here that suggests that your service acumen is more competitive, more pronounced than others. You've given us the academic pieces of your application, and you've told us this is what I have to offer, and yet there's nothing else there to support it. So this is not what medicine is. It is not, it is an academic exercise in the first couple of years to get your licensing taken care of, but then you're working with people. We put you into the wards and we ask you to serve others.
Right, absolutely.
So you have to demonstrate that. Just like you have to demonstrate success in the test and you have to demonstrate success in the classroom, you have to demonstrate success in working with others.
In the few moments that we have left, because we're gonna be heading off air, what would you say is what students should look for when they're choosing the medical school first? Because some of our kids are competitive enough.
Yeah.
In about 15 seconds, if you can just, well, they said we have 1 minute.
Okay.
So just kind of give me an idea of what you feel, what are some of the tools that they can use to come by the best fit for themselves?
Well, the medical school admissions requirements is published by AMCAS, the AAMC, and that's where all medical schools submit varying details on their environment, their culture, their student body.
That's the
outcomes.
MSAR.
The MSAR, right. That's your go-to. Obviously, websites helpful, but they're all marketing. All right, so you have to remember, if you can visit a campus, if you can talk to students of those campuses, of those institutions, in my opinion, that's the best opportunity. And when students are invited to interview with us, we put them in front of our students and we say, have your conversations, ask your questions. Obviously, we have faculty and we have staff that are there, but hearing from other students and how well they are, like how happy are they in pursuing this goal? How healthy are they and getting enough sleep and being resourced enough to not have significant anxiety?
Absolutely.
Because if you're going into a very competitive environment and there's no support and there's just anxiety amongst your peers, then it won't be a great outcome for you.
Absolutely. Well, certainly finding a good fit for the medical school of your choice is ideal, and Loyola is a wonderful place. We thank you, Mr. Neighbors, for coming and sharing with us about application tips that you may need to get into medical school. Thank you so much. All right. Good to see you.